So much of the early recording was like guerrilla warfare. There's only one guy on stage that needs to know the downbeat. I walk in and I see Robert Plant or Clapton, and they go, "Hey Lee, how you doing?" I go, "Why do they know me?"
Like to stop and thank you, babe. Thank you.
Guys like him, he's just another world altogether. I remember him playing me a song, and I'm sitting there going, I would saw my legs off to write a song that good. Well, his superpower was that he was Phil Collins, because he was everything. He had it. He was just such a remarkable guy to work with. I had 5 days to learn the show. I work best under pressure. Everything I do is predicated on the song. There's the basic job, and then there's these other things you can do that put you a little ahead of the game.
So we are here with the incredible Leland Sklar, who I've been wanting to interview for all of my life, actually. All of my life. You've obviously heard of Lee Sklar before, but just in case you haven't, just in case you've been living under a rock somewhere, Lee's recorded on thousands and thousands and thousands of recordings. I've had to write a list, and this is only a tiny list of some of the people that he's played with, but it'll just give you a taster. We've got James Taylor, Carole King, Linda Ronstadt, Phil Collins, Toto, Lyle Lovett, Diana Ross, Hall & Oates, Faith Hill. And I'm still not finished. Vanessa Carlton, Jackson Browne, Dolly Parton, Ray Charles, Billy Cobham, Willie Nelson, and more. Can we play a track? Can I just throw you on the hot seat? We'll play a track, and then we can find out where this conversation takes us.
Let everybody kind of go, really? That's what he's all about?
I got to have her now. I got to get closer, but I don't know how. She makes me nervous, it makes me scared, but I feel so good if I just say the word. Come Sussudio. Everybody just say the word.
Outrageous, outrageous. Can you just break that down for me?
I think what I ended up doing, because it's morphed over the years, because the original track was all synthesizer done by David Frank. And when we went and listened to the playback, I looked at Phil and I said, we're in so much trouble right now because of all the filtering and all the different things. The original track has so much of the bow, 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 bow kind of sound to it. And it became one of these things that it kind of changed with each performance and each tour. And live with it, it was always fun because there was so much distraction on stage, with the horn section, the singers, and people are dancing and everything. So I could just like zone out with it. It became a very organized chaos for me. But,
hey, listen, we're going to be going back to the main video in just a few seconds, but quickly, I wanted to let you know that we have got a special SPL giveaway club that you are going to want to be a part of because it's 100% free to join. Each and every month, we give away audio interfaces, strings, bass heads, pedals, cables, multi-effects, straps. We even give away basses. And to join the giveaway club for free, all you need to do is go to splgiveaway.com or just click the link in the description. Now, with that said, good luck in this month's giveaway, and let's get back to the main video.
I think for me, intrinsically, I think whatever my feel is, it's been there since the beginning. I studied classical piano. And by the time I changed, I was 5 when I started playing piano.
Like super young.
And I was super young, and it was one of these things where, not so much a prodigy, but I had a lot of success. I met like Eugene Normandy of the Philadelphia Orchestra when I was 7 years old. I won awards from the Hollywood Bowl Association.
You were like 7, didn't you?
Yeah. But when I was 12, I went into junior high school kind of, cockily thinking, your piano player has arrived. And the music teacher, Ted Lynn, said, there's like 40 kids that play piano. We need a string bass player. And he pulled an old blonde K upright out of the back, an old plywood. And he showed me how to hold it. And I'm sitting there with this old bass, and I just went and felt that run through me. And I just looked at him, I said, sold.
Really?
And at that point, piano just went to the back, and I needed something new at that point.
Did you carry on playing?
A little bit, but I was pretty burned out at that point. I had done lots of recitals and stuff, and I think I was ready for a change, not knowing it, but as soon as the change, the opportunity came, I just went, I'm out of here.
Do you think that earlier, so from like 5 to when did you
12.
start playing bass? Like 5 to 12, those piano years. Do you think that's where your ears came from?
Yeah.
Is that like understand? And also like your ears, and what I mean by that is just being able to hear sort of like the,
Well, I also came from an incredibly eclectic household. There weren't musicians in the house, but my parents loved music, and so the record collection was extensive. So I was listening to everything, from classical to jazz to lounge music, tiki, all that stuff. So my ears were pretty wide. At that point.
And did you have an understanding of harmony as well at that point? If somebody said, hey, it's a C minor, you were like, okay.
I might, if somebody played it for me and it said, here's an example, I would go, oh, I see what you're saying. But it wasn't until I got into formal education. And when I entered junior high school at 12, that's when there were official music classes. So I was studying theory and harmony, and that went all the way up through my first 2 years of college. But as far as how I approach songs and time and feel, I think that's always been there. It's nothing I've ever consciously thought about. I have to develop this. The only thing that really required development, I think, was just playing a lot, just to get your physical, dexterity and skills up, getting to know that neck, getting to know all the nuances of it. Having never thought I was going to be a professional musician.
Really?
Yeah.
Because when I read your biography, it's all about music.
Yeah.
There's so much music.
Well, when I finally went into college, I went to, it was called San Fernando Valley State College. It's Cal State Northridge now, out here in Los Angeles. And my first 2 years were in the music department. And I really, truly did not like it from the standpoint. And I went to, like, Tom Scott was in the school. I mean, there was a bunch of great players came out of that. But it seemed like they were concerned about gearing you towards a career as an educator.
Got it.
They wanted you to have teaching credentials. And I had no desire whatsoever to be a music teacher. I wanted to play. And so I ended up going to the administration building and taking a battery of aptitude tests. And my highest aptitude above music was in art and science. So I changed and did a co-science art major for the next 3 years in college. And I kind of was gearing towards being like a technical or medical illustrator at that point. Wow. But I was always in bands. I was always playing it. There were times where I was in 4 and 5 bands at a time. Every weekend we'd be playing clubs or frat parties or things like that. I loved music. It had nothing to do with that. But it's one of those weird things that nobody ever encourages you to do it. It doesn't look like a viable income source for you in life at this point. So they're kind of going, well, it's fun that you're doing that. Enjoy yourself, but maybe
what a
look
great
at
hobby.
look at law school or medical or something like that seems legitimate. But when I got in there, then it all started to kind of come together. When I started a fortunate aspect for me that came out of the piano, though, was being a really voracious reader musically. So when I started doing sessions, if the copyist screwed up and wrote the bass parts in treble clef or tenor clef, I could still read them.
You were fine.
I was fine with it. I mean, it's annoying, but it's fine. I could get myself through it. So that opened up an entire other world to me of all the guys that I was coming along with at that point. Most of them weren't adept at reading. So
it's like a superpower, actually, isn't it?
Well, it is. It really is. If you want to do these other things, you have to have, like almost every other job, there's the basic job, and then there's these other things you can do that kind of put you a little ahead of the game on it. So But when I started, with like bands in that period, it seems like when I listen back, I think I was playing then like I play now. Probably, just probably. Yeah, the thing also was we were just having the best time. It's the greatest community. When you get together with other musicians and stuff, and they're all, you're not like carrying one guy who's like, really, he owns the PA, so he's in the band. It was always just exhilarating to be in that environment. So I really loved it. I just and I still love it to this day. When my phone rings and somebody calls me about work, I'm as giddy as I was back when I was 18 years old.
Like during that period, obviously you were playing electric, but when did you start playing electric? Because before you were playing upright.
Yeah.
Like when did the upright started at 12?
Yeah.
When did you start picking up the electric?
I didn't have an upright, number one. I was able to use the school upright, that one, so I would drag that thing home with me.
Right.
And then when I would play, gigs like we played at the Lighthouse, which was the great jazz club down near the beach. And so I was probably about 14 and a half when I got my first electric.
Yeah.
There used to be a music store in the Musicians Union building. I think it was Stein Music, which became Stein on Vine, which became a whole other building across the street eventually. But my dad took me there, and I think I got a Melody bass and a St. George amp were my first. Yeah. And I was in heaven because my fingers were bleeding all the time being in bands.
Well, because of the upright.
Playing the upright with no mics or anything like that. So I think that was my first one. And then when I saw the Beatles, I ended up getting an Echo bass. Which, the poor man's Beatle bass at that point. And I got a Standell Super Imperial amp, which I wish I still had too. That was a bitchin' amp. And then I had the opportunity, I forget who had it, but that's when I got the Peace Love bass, which was at that time a candy apple red mint 62 jazz bass.
Do you want to grab it?
Yeah,
I'll hold that.
Here. A 1962 Fender jazz bass. Candy apple red, had the plates over it, everything. It had the felt spring-loaded mutes under it. Everything was perfect. And I thought, how can I screw this thing up? This was probably in 1966 when I was in college. I sat around one night. Now, I didn't drink, I didn't do drugs or anything, but I still had stupid ideas. And I had a knife and a hacksaw. So this had the beautiful horn coming up, so I immediately cut that off to make this thing look a little more Les Paul-y, and then changed this into this point, and then just started going at it. And actually all of the stain work in here, I think, was shoe polish.
Really?
And then I put,
is that what it is? Yeah.
And then I just painted varnish over it.
Yeah.
Now at one point, I don't know if you can see it, but there's a square on here. And back when I did it, I was a total Mothers of Invention freak. I followed them, saw all their concerts, Zappa.
Yeah.
So this was a picture of Frank Zappa decoupaged on the back of the bass for inspiration. Now, the biggest problem with this bass was having cut away so much body on it that it's... So I still have the strap somewhere in the house. I have an old strap, and right in the end of it, there's a 2-pound block of lead that I used for counterbalance on it to keep it...
to balance the actual
bass
down,
But this bass, this is the bass I used on all the early James Taylor stuff. I used this on Dr. My Eyes with Jackson Browne. I used it on Stratus with Billy Cobham. This was my go-to bass.
And it's essentially a jazz bass, right? It's just jazz
it's
bass.
Totally
it's got
stuck.
Jazz controls, volume, tone.
Volume, tone, original pickups and everything. It was just the rest of it that I messed
Badass bridge.
Well, it had the original bridge on it. And at some point, I think somebody turned me on to like badass.
It was the thing. There was
a moment in time where that was the
all
one
basses,
to go to.
If you didn't have a badass bass bridge, you weren't cool.
These may have been Yamaha tuners.
Oh yeah.
We ended up, something happened, and I ended up trying. So I experimented a little bit with this thing, but
This is an awful bass line. Like it's not awful to listen to, but to play it,
it's hideous.
Absolutely
It's just
stinks. I had to do it on a gig like 2 or 3 weeks ago, and as I was playing it, I was just thinking, I hate this. I hate playing this. It's just brutal.
Yeah.
Stratus Billy Cobham, 1973. Did you say?
1973.
Yeah.
Now the great thing about that project was I had our band, The Section, had been on the road with Mahavishnu Orchestra, opening for them for about 5 weeks.
Billy Cobham
was in the Mahavishnu Orchestra. And we spent the first week on the road trying to figure out where one was with those guys. They were
What are they doing?
It was unbelievable. But Billy and I became friends. And when the tour was over, he called me and he said, look, I got a record deal. Do you want to come to New York and do my album?
Yeah.
And I said, absolutely. Now, the thing that blew my mind was when I walked in the studio. I had been on the road with Billy and Jan Hammer, the keyboard player. Yeah. But I walk in and I see Tommy Bolin sitting there. Well, when I was in Wolfgang, Tommy was in a group called Zephyr, and we were managed by the same criminal.
Oh, wow.
And so I hadn't seen, so I walked in, it was like old home week when we got in the studio. And I go, Tommy, it was just great. And to me, Tommy, at that point, was probably one of the greatest guitar players ever. And sadly, he passed. I think he was 26 when he died. The Spectrum album, we did all of our tracks in 2 days. It's almost all first takes, first or second take at the most. Then there was a third day on that, which was a big band day, and Ron Carter played bass on the 2 songs that they did that day. And it was big horn section and all that, but all the other stuff we had done. And like Ken Scott was engineering that album, was one of the great engineers. And if you're listening to that album and you listen between some of the tracks, you hear all this kind of like, all these sounds. Robert Moog was at the session, and that was his first electronic drums. So Billy and he were experimenting with those, and that's where that stuff came from. But one of the best things was at Sam Ash Music, which was down the street from, we were at Electric Lady Studios in New York. Nearby was Sam Ash Music, and there was Gene Krupa's Chinese symbol hanging on the wall that Billy had lusted after forever. And they finally loaned it to him for the album.
No way.
Yeah, so he's sitting there and it's set up. And the first time he rode that thing, I'm looking in the control room, and Ken Scott's hair is stricken, and he's levitated at that point. I think every meter was totally pegged. It was the loudest cymbal I've ever heard. So finally, they took the cymbal and they put it way behind Billy. So when he's playing and he's riding it, there's no mic, and he's just playing behind him. It was like, it was so much of the early recording for all of us was like guerrilla warfare. Because there were no rules. Everybody was kind of making it up as you went along.
Building the plane as it was taken off.
Absolutely. And the thing that was great was, I think one of the greatest things was, especially out here in LA, that period from like 69 to about 76 was so alive. The music community, when you'd go to anybody's house and there'd be like David Crosby and Graham Nash and Stephen Stills and Joni Mitchell and Carole King, all these people, it was a community. And like, I remember being in the studio with James Taylor, and we were cutting, I think, Mexico. And David and Graham showed up just to hang out at the session, and James goes, well, let's go sing background. It was that kind of a scene, and they went in and cut these definitive parts. There was a vitality and an excitement in this town I've never seen anywhere else before. And it was like every day was a new experience. And with the advent of James becoming the face of this new style of music, the singer-songwriter movement, even though you had Dylan and Phil Oakes and all these people before that, and Peter, Paul, and Mary and all those kind of groups, something changed with James. And we were just so lucky that, we were the guys that were there. And probably one of the greatest things that came out of all of that was his manager was Peter Asher from Peter and Gordon back in the English Invasion and all that. He insisted for the first time that our names appear on the record jacket.
No way.
So when labels and artists were looking at James's record, they would look and they'd see my name and Russ Kunkel and Danny Korchmar. And they would go, well, if they're good enough for James, let's track them down. And so we literally went from no experience at all, no time spent in the studio, to be working around the clock. We were doing sometimes 4 and 5 sessions a day, 6, 7 days a week.
Wow.
It was
it was
insane.
off the back of that because people could finally see
yeah,
who was actually
because the
playing.
Wrecking Crew, who were the group of musicians back through the late 50s into the 60s, people would listen to Frank Sinatra, and they'd listen to the Mamas and the Papas, they'd listen to the Beach Boys. They had no idea it was all the same players. They were anonymous.
Yeah.
So for us, Peter really created an avenue that people recognized us. And so we were literally learning on the job. You know, I didn't know what DIs were, or, you know, what a direct box was, or how you mic a bass amp or anything like that. I was playing a bar.
Oh, right.
You know, one night.
Can I put a bit of James Taylor on?
Sure,
and then you
please.
can tell us just about the background of the song.
Oh,
and
sure.
And then we need to speak about Toto as well.
Oh, absolutely. No, we're not going to forget those guys.
I'm doing wrong today. Whenever I see you smile at me, no one can tell me that I'm doing wrong today. Whenever I see your smiling face my way, no one can tell me that I'm doing wrong.
So beautiful, isn't it?
No one can tell me that I'm doing wrong today. No, no, darling. La 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 la.
Quick fade.
So good.
Now, the bass on that was a Yamaha.
Really?
Yeah.
I always thought it was Frankenstein.
No, what happened was Yamaha came to Los Angeles in the early 70s with a bunch of one-off prototype basses.
Yeah.
And the bass that I got one, Abe Laboriel got one. It's a group of us were all given to work with, just to see and experiment.
Was this like the era of the Yamaha BB? Was it the
It was
BBs?
before that.
Before
This
that,
was
the
the
broad
predecessors.
basses or something like that.
Yeah, this was the predecessor. And this one was very much like a P bass. It had a single pickup in the P bass configuration. And I used that on our section, I think our second section album. And it was a really lovely bass, but I mean, it was just weird. It had tuning machines that looked kind of like they would have been on the chariot wheels in Ben-Hur. It had these big points. Every time you went to tune, you were cutting your knuckles. And when I'd play, for some reason, the pickup kept going into the body. Just you couldn't get the thing to stay in. They were really cheesy, but it sounded really good. I ended up purging a whole bunch of instruments years ago because, to me, the worst thing is for an instrument to sit unplayed.
To not be used.
And so I moved them on. I had like an Ernie Ball earthwood bass and all those things. Yeah. But that was the Yamaha on that, and also I owe a lot of that to the great engineering and mixing of Val Garay, who did that, because it's, you know,
it sounds incredible.
Yeah, I mean, those albums with James were just great. Flag and In the Pocket and Gorilla, all those albums.
What was the like? Did James come to you guys with like a fully formed idea, or was it like the opposite of that? Was
he would play guitar, and then we would find parts.
Got it.
For it, and everybody just, there's that thing where everybody had big ears. Everybody's listening, whatever. Like Russ plays like no other drummer I ever worked with. When you listen to like Fire and Rain and those things and the brushwork and stuff that he would do, it's really amazing. And Cooch just thought in a whole different way with guitar. But the first time we rehearsed some of this stuff before we went in the studio. And when we would do those turnarounds and modulations, man, Cooch could not wrap his head around that at all. Man, there was a train wreck every time, and he'd be sitting there going, fuck, fuck. That was classic. It was fantastic. Yeah. But, you know, James would just sit down and play a song. But, I mean, there were times when I was with him where I remember him playing me a song, and he goes, I don't know if this is good enough for the album. And he plays me Mill Worker.
No way.
And I'm sitting there going, I would saw my legs off to write a song that good. You know, I mean, it's just these guys like him, he's just another world altogether in his compositional skills and everything. So it was great. And then you'd go out of that and, you know, before that though, but I mean, like the first time I was in the studio with Jackson Browne, and we're cutting, Doctor My Eyes
Yeah,
and stuff. And and when we cut that, Russ played congas on the basic track and then overdubbed drums. And then Jesse Ed Davis shows up to do a guitar solo. And he literally unpacked his guitar, put it on, and said, "Let me hear it," and noodled along. And that's the solo that was on.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, incredible.
I mean, amazing stuff. So,
Yeah.
But there was that thing. One of the things that was great during that period, too, was there were budgets, number one. So, like from the Wrecking Crew period, like they'd go in the studio and it'd be a 3-hour date. They'd cut a couple of tunes, move on. When we were working with James, we'd be in the studio for a couple of weeks. And sometimes he would end up going back once the grooves started to settle in. You'd go back and maybe revisit the early songs because something had changed. And sometimes you'd go, "No, it's perfect." Or sometimes you'd go, "Oh, let's try this."
Yeah.
And I remember at one point, James had an idea I forget the song it was, but the hook line on it was "Letting the Time Go By." And rather than just singing "Letting the Time Go By," what he ended up doing, this is when you had time, he sang it, then they played it backwards, wrote it out phonetically backwards, recorded it phonetically backwards, then reversed the tape, so it was going, "Letting the time go by." I mean, it was like this other thing, but it's the kind of stuff now that people go, "Come on, we don't have time for that."
But you had like time.
But we had time just to do things like at one point they made a voice organ where you got some other singers in, and they sang every note on the scale. And then when it came time to doing this choral piece, everybody in the band was on faders, pulling up chords and things like that. We orchestrated the mixing console. So, I mean, it's like there was just things that went on that just will never be seen again. I mean, the sad part is so many of the studios are gone now with the advent of people working at home and people, bean counters coming in and looking at real estate and just going, that's a recording studio, but it would make more money as a strip mall. And so you lose all these amazing theaters and stuff. It's just, it is what it is, but once again, it's a fascinating period, and I'm forever grateful of it. And I've always been fanboy. I mean, for me, that has never ended. When I'm doing projects, and I walk in and I see Barbra Streisand or Andy Griffith or any of these people. I mean, it always freaks me out. Like when if I see Robert Plant or Clapton, and they go, "Hey Lee, how you doing?" I go, "Why do they know?"
Oh, that's weird.
Why do they? It's just too weird. I don't have a perspective on me in this business. I'm just grateful to be a working musician. I mean, I feel so blessed every day that I get to go do this as my job, that I've actually never had to work.
It's doing something. It's like doing the thing that you love. Absolutely, 100%.
In all the NAMM shows I've gone to, I've only left with 3 things from NAMM that was great. Mike Tobias had a room at one of the hotels, at the Hilton, I think. And he was showing off his basses there, and I go in the room and I go, "A lot of stuff going on here, but where's the sound coming from?" And I look down on the floor between the 2 beds, and there were 2 little 8-inch speakers that these guys were playing through. And there were these 2 guys sitting on the bed over there. I kind of go, "Well, basses are great. I've known Mike forever, and his basses are beautiful." And I'm going, what is with those? And I met Larry Ullman and John Dong at that point, who had Euphonic audio. And I left that show, and I managed to take their card. And about 2 weeks later, I called Larry, and I said, "I have not stopped thinking about this." And I said, and he sent me 2 of the 8-inch speakers on it. And right after that, we had done a concert. Nicolette Larson, the great Nicolette Larson, had passed away, and we did a tribute concert to her at Santa Monica Civic Auditorium. And there was everybody from Joe Walsh to Linda Ronstadt to Jimmy Buff. Everybody was on this show. So everybody had their gear on stage, and they asked me, they said, "Well, is your bass rig here yet?" And I said, "What's on stage?" And they're out there, the sound guys, and they're looking around.
Looking for it.
They go, "No, did somebody move it?" And I said, "It's out there." And I showed them, and it had between all these guitar amps, there's just 2 little 8-inch speakers. And it killed, and I became absolutely enamored with euphonic audio at that point. So
they were the first ones really to
really
make
micro.
That. It was like a micro
system.
bass amp.
You could pick the thing up like with your fingers.
Yeah.
So that was the first thing I ever left a NAMM show with, where I went, this is good. I need this.
Yeah.
The second was Sheldon. When I met Sheldon, that was really a game changer for me. It really upped the bar for me a whole lot. And then the other one was when I discovered battery-operated stand lights. Because so many gigs I would do, you'd be out there on stage and you got a music stand if you're doing one of those gigs and you want a light on it, but they couldn't get the cord all the way back to the AC. And I went, this is great. I can be anywhere on here. I can turn that light on.
If somebody's not used a battery-operated stand light, you don't know like how this is like a lifeline. If these things go out, it's doom.
Yeah, you're the guy on stage that still has a glow if somebody kicks the power off. I mean, for me, I love going to those shows from the standpoint of the social aspect of it, seeing all the different makers and all the different cats are all there, and I get to see people that come in from all over the world. And we really get to see each other and hang out. But as far as gear goes, I'm not a gear guy. I really don't care about it. I'll play pretty much anything that gets handed to me.
Yeah.
But when you can find that one thing where you go, this is really good. And that's what happened with me with these. And it's become my kind of go-to touring instrument. I'm still, in my heart of hearts, I'm a 4-string guy. I started, on 4-string, and that's the way I think. But if I'm doing a show and all of a sudden I have to have a 5-string for that D.
Yeah.
And I figure to make the front of house mixer's life easy, because I've gone to gigs where I see the bass player's got like 10 basses on stage, a whole different EQs, channels for everything. I go, no, I want to keep it easy. So I just play the whole thing, but I still think of it as a 4-string when I'm playing, but to have that at my disposal.
Yeah.
In the same way, one of the greatest inventions to me is the hip shot detuner.
Oh, have you got a detuner on there
I've got
as well?
a detuner on this one as well. I have one of mine has 3 detuners on it. I've got it on the B, the E, and the A also. But it's like with James Taylor, I was playing a 4-string, and if I had a 5-string, songs like Millworker and stuff, which were in a drop D tuning, I had to play a low D, but I had a melodic part to play on top. If I had a 5-string, I couldn't do that because you have to finger that. But with the hip shot, I could drop the E to a D, so I had an open D, and then I could play melodic.
Could hit
thing.
the open D.
I had a pedal tone going. So these are all tools. I always look at it like, when you're having something work done on your house and a guy shows up, he's got an assortment of tools that he brings with him. And it can be from different companies and all that. Yeah. At the end of the day, it's the job that's critical. Yeah. And so for me, I have a few basses, but each one serves a different need and they have different, things that work for them.
Do you know, when you're listening to a track, say so like a producer or an artist sends you a track, when you put it on, do you know pretty much immediately
many times
which bass you're going to use?
Pretty much. There's a lot of times. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll immediately check the key.
Right.
And if it's going to be like in D or C, I might go, I might want this. Just even if I don't play that C until the last note of the song, but I want
you want that available.
I want it to culminate.
Yeah.
And you give that at the end and let it ring out, and it can make the song at that point.
Yeah.
But it's like I remember I did B.B. King's 80th birthday album. And I mean, all these things have different things. When I was doing Vanessa Carlton's album with 1,000 Miles on it, one of the songs that we did on that was Painted Black, Stones. Yeah. And I had my Frankenstein, I had a bunch of basses there. Nothing worked. Nothing just sounded right for it. And I called Andy Brower in town, who rents instruments. I said, do you have a Hofner?
No way.
And he had a Hofner, and he brought it down. And it,
like the violin bass?
Yeah, the violin bass. And so we plugged that in and went, it's great. This is perfect for this one. Yeah. So I immediately got a Hofner at that point. And I hardly ever used it. But when I went in to do B.B. King's album, I took the Hofner and I stuffed it full of foam rubber to really deaden it all up. And it sounded like an old upright.
They're incredible. They sound great.
For a cheesy piece of crap, if McCartney hadn't played that.
So if he hadn't used the Hofner.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they would have had the thing. But the thing I thought that was really cool is I saw an interview with Paul. And he talked about how the thing, when he started to play his Hofner again, he said, I forgot that the lighter you play it, the better it sounds. You dig in and they just completely collapse on you.
Do you play lightly? I get the sense.
No, I did play hard.
Do you play it hard?
Yeah. But the thing that was one of my funniest moments was when I finally met McCartney. I met him at Nebworth. In
Nebworth 90. Yeah,
Nebworth
90, yeah.
And I see he and Linda were sitting there in the canteen having lunch. And I thought, I'm going to break some glass and throw it on the ground so I can crawl through it over there, because I love the Beatles so much. And he sees me and he goes, "Oh, Lee Sklar, I always wanted to meet you." And I'm going,
shit.
"Don't do this to me." But I said, I was an usher at the Hollywood Bowl when you guys played there. I got to see the Beatles live.
That's incredible.
Yeah. And then years later, I've played with Ringo and stuff. And those are those moments where you sit there going, "This is too weird. What's going on here?" Paul's playing to me the lyrical side of his parts, especially the kind of that mid-on Beatles. When you're listening to Paperback Writer and all these songs, you're just going, this is just
it's incredible.
Best.
It's confusing to me, like how a couple of lads from Liverpool did that. It was from a writing perspective, the bass lines, the harmony. It's like really mature. It's really inventive. It's
the best. I mean, it's just the best. And I can still sit there and watch Help and Hard Day's Night and stuff. And I love this. I mean, just everything about it was great. So, but it was fun doing the BB thing. So I took that bass in, but I just stuffed a couple of pieces of foam under it just to really deaden it up. And man, it just was perfect for that album. So each of these tools has its own place. And you just kind of sit there. But like you said, there are times when I'll listen, but there's other times where I'll kind of experiment with a couple of instruments till we find the one that fits sonically. It's got the personality for that song, because everything I do is predicated on the song. It's got nothing to do with me or anything. I listen to a song and I just immediately start thinking about sometimes what's the least I can do for this and to justify being there. Because I'm hearing things going on and I go, I don't want to get in the way. I just want to give you a big pillow to build on. It's not about dig me kind of stuff.
Have you always had that maturity in your playing in terms of, what's the least I can do? How can I support the song the most? We were talking earlier about how when I listened to you when you were younger, I hear the bass player you are now. It's not like I'm listening to two different bass players. So
I think it's always been my nature. I've always loved songs, and I always loved just finding that perfect thing. Because I've done clinics where people have said, like you worked on country, isn't that boring? And I go, no, not at all. I said, when you're doing all that shit, but if you're only going, just little things. How do you make that note ring? And if the next note is this, do you want to go, or do you want to, there's nuances amongst the simplicity that sometimes is the most complicated stuff. Some of those songs are the hardest songs to play. You work on an album and everybody's shredding, and then you get to that one song where everybody goes, "Oh, we'll be out of here in 5 minutes." And 3 hours later, you're going, "We still haven't got it." Because each one has its own thing, and you dedicate yourself to finding that thing, and that's the thing I've always loved doing. I love when I'm presented a song, and I was also really blessed that when things started, I was with people like James Taylor and Jackson Brown and Carole
incredible
King,
songwriters,
the greatest songwriters, the Neil Sadakas. When I listen to Laughter in the Rain, Neil Sedaka, I think that's one of my best performances on that song. It's nothing flashy or anything, but every time I hear that, I just kind of go, so love the way this turned out. And then you get to do the Billy Cobhams and different stuff. I've done Japanese anime stuff where it's shredding on it and stuff. But I'm not shredding like when I watch Billy Sheehan in his heyday shredding,
Oh my word,
I mean, I can find my niche. Jeff Porcaro was very much like this, where when I get called for a project, if I don't think I'm the right guy, I make suggestions as to who to call to a producer. I go, no, the important thing is the project.
Okay, so I love YouTube, you probably love YouTube, but let's be honest. it's not the best platform for in-depth teaching. Enter the SBL Academy. At SBL, we break down the bass with a curriculum-driven approach that spans from complete beginner level to super advanced. We also cover all kinds of genres, skills, and techniques, all brought to you by world-class bass instructors. And best of all, you can get started today for free at trysbl.com.
Should we put on a track? I'd love to hear you play again.
You want to do Lyle?
Let's do Lyle.
Let's do Lyle.
But Texas won't you? Yes, that's right. You're not from Texas. No. But Texas won't you anyway? That's right. You're not from Texas. That's right. You're not from Texas. That's right. You're not from Texas. Texas won't you anyway? Texas won't you anyway?
Oh.
I love working with Lyle. I've been working with Lyle since '87.
Yeah.
And recording with him, and we started touring on a regular basis. So we're going to be out a big chunk this year. We were out a lot last year.
You're going to the UK, right?
Yeah, we're going to the UK on Friday. We're starting Glasgow and then Dublin, Belfast, and then we're doing, I think there's American Music Awards are happening.
Oh, yeah.
And we're playing that, and then we're doing 2 shows in London, and then come home, and a few days later head to Texas and start the acoustic tour, which I think is going to run out into May.
Yeah.
And then in summer we'll put the large band back together again and go back out. So it's great. But I get to work with Russ Kunkel's playing drums on it, my old buddy for a half a century, and Jim Cox, and great musicians. It's one of those gigs where you sometimes almost forget to play because you're watching the other players. This was never an actual instrument. I have no idea.
Happy accident.
It was. Well, I have no idea how I came about getting this, but all I had was this. This was originally a 1962 Precision neck. Now, I don't like P basses at all. I mean, to me, because I started when I finally got a real bass, it was a jazz bass. So that was just, if I had started with a P bass, I would have probably liked the P bass. So you just go with your preference. But but
that's a P bass neck. Yeah.
This is a P bass neck. But what happened was back in the early 70s, kind of 72, 73, the real watering hole in Los Angeles for musicians was Westwood Music in Westwood. And Fred Wallachy, his family had this. And it was one of these places, anytime you walked in there, you would see Jackson Browne, J.D. Souther, any of the guys. That was the hang.
Yeah.
And there was a great room for jamming in there. And Fred had like the best instruments and the most beautiful vintage. I mean, I lusted after an old Gibson Mandocello forever, and he never would sell it. But the repair guy who did all their work there was a guy named John Carruthers, who's still working. Westwood Music is long gone. But I talked to John one day and I showed him the neck, and he said, we should make a bass, let's just do something. So he told me at that point, Charvel company, who was doing replacement parts, had come into being out in San Dimas, California. And that's where this bass body came from. I went out to the factory, and there was a stack about this high of blank bodies.
Oh, blank bodies.
It was all blanks. Yeah. And what I did was I took a wire and I hung each of them from the wire and just tapped them. And this is the one that resonated the best to me. Oh, so I ended up getting this, took it back to John. This was it's an alder body. This would have been where the precision pickups would have been under here. Yeah. But in my heart of hearts, I'm a jazz bass guy, so I really wanted to have pickups do jazz ones. I met Rob Turner, who had started EMG at that point. Ended up getting these pickups from him. This is their first generation. You can't see it there, but there's like a big EMG across the surface of these. And so I got these, but we put these where jazz pickups would have gone.
Did you ever think about putting jazz pickup, just single coils in there?
Well, they didn't have any. And
Oh,
I
they
wanted,
didn't-
these
right,
were all
got
they
it.
had at that point.
Yeah.
So we ended up going with these. Now, in the course of doing this, I kind of looked at Leo's original design for Fender, and if these had been there, this pickup would have been closer to the bridge, and this pickup would have been closer to the neck.
Yeah.
And I kind of thought, by the nature of the sonics of the instrument, this is the G and the D are going to have more clarity than the E and the A. So why the hell would you put that half of the pickup closer to them?
Yeah.
So I said, we're going to be routing it for this.
Was the reverse P a thing at this time?
No, nobody had ever done it.
Right, got
So,
it. Yeah.
so we ended up routing it out and putting these in this position. This is where the original pickup would have been, but I didn't want to do another hole in it. So there's two 9 volts under
it,
here because
yeah.
we're running 18 volts on these.
Yeah.
Now, again, I really liked the jazz neck, and this was a P neck. So I brought that bass to John, and we made a template off of that neck and reshaped the P neck into a jazz neck.
Shape the neck.
In the course of doing that, we had to take the frets out to reshape the neck. Now, I was walking around the shop, and I looked on the wall, and I saw this spool of fret wire, and I said, "What's that?" And he goes, "That's mandolin wire." I said, "Let's do that." He went, "Well, that'll never work. You know, that's for a mandolin." I said, "Let's try it. See what happens. You know, if it doesn't work, you know, I'll pay you for another refret, and we'll go to with regular. And I don't want jumbos. I liked glissing, and everything was clicking.
Right. Got it,
So we ended up putting these on, and to me, it was a game changer in my playing sonically, the way it sounded. And then I met Dave Borisoff, I think is Borisov, I can't remember his last name because there's a sax player in town here who has almost the identical name, but he started Hipshot. And this was one of the very first prototypes of a Hipshot detuner. They look a little bit different now, but this is the thing to me too, like where it's not, I haven't tuned it, but to have that with where with a 5-string, I'd have to be fingering that, and I couldn't do that. So for me, the Hipshot it's an inexpensive piece of gear that is fantastic. So John ended up putting this bass together, and we plugged it in, and it's one of those things that you go, it could have sucked. It's a crapshoot. But it didn't.
Yeah. And this is this like the majority of your career? Has this been
probably 85% of everything I've played has been on this?
Yeah.
Now, when the Dodgers won the World Series, the LA Dodgers won the World Series in 1981, myself and Jeff Porcaro and a few guys got called to go in the studio to cut Queen's "We Are the Champions" with the big blue wrecking crew.
Yeah.
At that point, there was no signatures. This was just a blank body.
Yeah.
We went in the studio, and at the end of the session, they were signing baseballs and everything, going, "Yeah, we'll do it." And they were all hammered because they had won the series the night before.
Yeah.
So they were like still in like raving mode at that point. And I looked at them, I said, "Well, I'll take a baseball, but why don't you sign my bass?"
Yeah.
So they went, "Really?" So they signed it and moved on at that point. Then I got to a gig with James Taylor and Rocky Blyer and Lynn Swan, who were in the Pittsburgh Steelers. I was talking to them after they saw the bass, and they went, "Baseball players are pussies. You need football players in here." So they signed it. And then it just became this thing where people are all over it. And some people were really smart and signed like Joan Baez is under here where it wouldn't get touched and stuff. And other people have been worn off. I've managed to hold on to Jeff Porcaro here, though.
Incredible.
Clapton signed it with a pen and ground his name into where it says Highly EC on it. And we did Sesame Street with James Taylor. So the guy who does Oscar the Grouch signed it as Oscar the Grouch.
Way. Amazing.
B.B. King's kind of disappearing here. Got Hugh Padgham under here. And then it's all over.
It's all over
the whole thing is
isn't it?
Merle Haggard and Floyd. Let's see who we got here. I mean, it's the thing that's amazing to me is I just go through it, and it really is a trip down. Like right in here, it says, "Lee, may the force be with you," and that's George Lucas signed that.
Get out.
And then
Seriously?
and then Peter Peter Max made the little Saturn next to it. So it's to me, this is really fun. Now the thing that was a drag is this is my main axe, and if I would have clear coated this, it could have changed the sound. And the most important thing is the working instrument.
Yeah.
So at one point, Yamaha built me their interpretation of this, even though the pickups were, it sounded okay. They hadn't really gone full, and it was really funny that when they contacted me, they said, what color would you like it? And I said, well, make it jet black. Make it jet black would be great. The thing arrived, I think it arrived when we were in the studio doing Gorilla with James Taylor. And so I hadn't unpacked it yet. I brought it to the studio. And when I opened the case, I open it up and I'm looking down and I go, staring, because I thought the inscrutable Japanese, this is great. They're thinking jet black, jet, fire, flames. So I looked and it had flames coming up the body, but going in like the wrong direction. It's like it was sitting in a fire rather than having, purpose and direction. So I sanded the whole thing down, and I took it over to Yamaha YGD and had the guys spray it black. So it was just black. Well, then I started getting autographs on that one. And when it got, and it's great because I've got like Bob Hope, and I did gigs with like Bob Hope and Milton Berle and Debbie Reynolds and all these people. Once it totally filled up, I took it back and we clear coated it. So that one, that's preserved. That's preserved.
Yeah, and you don't gig with this one anymore, do you? Is that
I do studio work with it, but the road is too scary now. The way baggage is handled and everything. I remember because one of the other companies I've been active with for a number of years now is Warwick. Now, some people, they'll see you like with a Dingwall and then a Warwick. And they go, oh, these guys are just gear whores. They'll do anything. Well, when I got involved with Hans Peter, I said, look, I'm totally covered for solid bodies. Now, if you want to work together, I'm happy to work with you, but we need to do something that there's no cross collateralization. And what had happened for me was I had been at a bass player live function at the, in Hollywood, I forget where they had it at some big.
Oh, they had it in the rehearsal studios.
I think it was SIR had it.
They had it at SIR.
Yeah, so they had a big room in there, and I got there early one day, and I went in there, and it was one of their star basses was sitting on fretless star bass, acoustic bass, hollow body, and I picked it up and started playing. I went, oh, fuck, this is really nice. This is really sweet. And then I put it down and I split, and then I was talking to Steve Bailey after that. And I said, that thing's really nice. I really like that. And I was on the road with Lyle Lovett, and I invited Steve to come to a gig because we were, I think, in North Carolina where he lives. And he shows up at the gig with that bass. And he said, I told Hans Peter you loved it. So he said, well, he sent it to him and said, give it to him. Oh, and I had never met Hans at that point. And so coming after that was the NAMM show. So I went to the NAMM show and met Hans Peter and told him, thank you so much, man, this is great. And I ended up with a fretless and a fretted, and then we did an 8-string also.
Oh, incredible.
And after a while, Hans said, could we do a signature one? I said, well, I don't know what else we would do because to me, it's a great instrument. So I worked with, he's no longer with them, I think, but Marcus Spangler was there. So he came up with one. I said, let's change it then. And I wanted to change the body so it was more, because with the star bass, the horns and everything are all parallel. I said, I'd like to throw it a little off so it's easier when you're sitting. And I said, and plus that sharp angle edge, I said, it'd be nice to have something with a bit of a slope. You couldn't do that on a hollow body, so we ended up doing a chambered body. On my signature one is chambered, and then they could lay on what they wanted to do for shape. And I love that bass. I've used that on a lot of projects too. But what happened with the star bass was, and this is why I find traveling so discouraging. I was going back to Boston to do a project with John Butcher from that band Barefoot Servants that I played you. And I at that point I just had it in a gig bag, and I go on the plane, and the stewardess goes, when you're getting on the plane, there's usually like their closet, like right on there before you go down the aisle. And she said, it'll be fine here. You just put it here. We're cool. So I put it in there, and I'm getting off the plane. I pick it up. I go, well, obviously they had packed suitcases in there because when I got to the studio and unzipped the bag, the body had been crushed on it. So I'm sitting there with gaffer tape, like pulling it together and taping it all up. I got through the session, and then I had to ship it back to Germany to be rebuilt by the guys. And of course, the airline doesn't give a crap about that. And I just thought, can't do this anymore. So the beauty of having this instrument is when I travel with the Dingwall, if God forbid something happens there, Sheldon could send me out one, and they're so consistent that, whatever they send is perfect.
If you haven't seen this before, obviously it looks a bit wacky, doesn't it? If you haven't noticed yet, the frets are fanned. So what's the concept?
Well, this is a Dingwall bass.
Yeah.
I met Sheldon Dingwall at a NAMM show in Los Angeles probably about 20 some years ago. Yeah. And he saw me walking down an aisle and he came up holding a bass and he said, would you try one of my basses? And normally I never try people's instruments at NAMM because the minute you sit down and you pick up an instrument, a crowd gathers and wants you to impress them.
Yeah.
And that's not how I play it. You know, for me, that's not the world I live in. Give me a song and I'll work on the song, but I'm not going to sit there and show you my chop. Yeah. My NAMM show chop.
Yeah.
So I looked at the bass and I said, explain to me. And he told me that Ralph Novak's, a California luthier, had come up with the concept of fan fretting. And really the essence of it is if you lifted the lid of a piano and you look at the strings, the low note strings are longer than the high note strings.
Yeah.
Done. So all this really does is temper the instrument. One of the things that I had been looking for a long time was a great deal of my studio work, especially, is replacing synth bass, pre-programmed stuff.
Yeah.
And inevitably, whoever's programming that has a left arm that's about 18 inches longer than the right.
They do not take bass players into account, do they?
No, they're down there at the bottom of that keyboard, but they get used to that sonic, and so all of a sudden, this isn't enough for them. They want. So I was really on a quest. I mean, I tried a bunch of different 5 strings, and none of them really. That B string really moved air more than it moved tone.
Yeah.
And so the minute I tried one of Sheldon's basses, I think I found what I want.
And did you know that he was going to be at the show? Did you go to the show to check him out?
Oh, so it was had no idea.
It was a happy accident. Yeah.
It was a total accident.
These have got the mandolin frets on as well.
I have Mando frets on the Warwick basses.
Oh, do you? Yeah.
The Ding. Every bass that I've got had. I mean, I've got a couple of old basses that I've never found the need to do it because I don't use them that much. One of the fun basses I have is one of the Fender Road-worn jazz basses.
Oh, yeah,
the Mexican ones.
Yeah.
They're great. I mean, if I play that next to like mine, it's really similar. I mean, it's really amazing how, and it's got that vintage look. They
feels worn in.
It feels worn in. You look at the metal work; it's all got patina. So. But for the most part, the thing I love is just having the one bass, and I'm using I pack it in a gig bag and put it in one of those SKB cases and stuff. And
the bass safe.
Yeah. I mean, which isn't, it's not going to protect it if something runs over it or something. But it's nice. It's got wheels on the case, so when you're walking through the airport, you're not hauling an anvil case with you and killing yourself.
If we wanted to hear this bass, what's the best way? Have we got it?
I think Behind the Lines with Phil Collins.
Oh, let me put it on.
Yeah, that was from our show at Reunion Arena in Dallas, Texas in 1985. And the band was the Phoenix Horns, who were the horn section from Earth, Wind and Fire. Chester Thompson on drums, Daryl Sturmer on guitar, Phil Collins on
So they're not
vocals.
beginners then?
Yeah. And Peter Robinson on keyboards on this. Now, Peter was in Brand X with Phil and stuff. Yeah. But when 1990 came along, Peter had started a career doing music for film. And he really wasn't about to walk away from that to hit the road again. Yeah. So Daryl brought in Brad Cole, who had known, but they had worked with Gino Vanelli and done a bunch of stuff together. And Brad was there all the way through Phil's retirement.
Oh, man.
So cool. This was fun.
I don't understand. Is it trying to hold my hand? Don't wanna leave you, I don't wanna go. I'm losing all control. Can't you see me? I'm slipping away. Why can't we stay if you're the will to keep me here? Oh Lord.
Tight as a tick. It was so good.
Incredible.
So in the end, it goes down the octave from the part.
Like playing drums.
Oh, yeah, it's amazing. I mean,
Talk about playing with Phil Collins.
I love Phil so much. Phil and I met doing a Lee Ritenour album in, I think, 1981. I don't remember the name of the album, but we did a track together on it. And I was aware of him through Genesis, and he was aware of me through like the James Taylor, but he was also aware of me because of Mike Post's TV things, because they, like in the Genesis show, they would play like Rockford Files and stuff on that. And so he found out that I played on that. So we did that thing, and then he called me to do his Face Value project, and I said, I can't, I'm already busy with James Taylor, I couldn't do it. I said, but so Mo Foster ended up doing it.
Oh, yeah.
I said, but man, I'd love to work with you at some point. So, you know, please keep me in mind. In '84, he called me and he said, doing a new album, would you come to London? We worked at Townhouse Studios in London. And that's when we did No Jacket Required. Now, the thing that was weird was he was still not really, I mean, he was the drummer from Genesis at that point, but people really didn't know. And then Sussudio came out. And all of a sudden, when we were playing small venues, and all of a sudden, it was over.
Was that the shift?
That was the shit hit the fan, and we were in arenas and everything. So the whole energy of the thing shifted completely. And so we did that one, and then he called me again. Then after that, they did another Genesis tour, and then he called me in '89 to do the But Serious album. And then we spent '90 was a solid year on the road. I think we went on the road like January 3rd and finished like mid-December. You know, it was like just long. And then we separated in the 90s and stopped working at that point. And then he called me again in 2001 and said, can you come back? I'd like, you to come back. And then we did the first Final Farewell tour. Now the drag with that tour was around that time was when he did the music for Tarzan. And we had, this tour was supposed to encompass Southeast Asia and Africa, and the producers of Tarzan insisted that Phil come to New York and be there for the rehearsals. So we had to cancel that part of our tour, which was really a drag. Then we went out again. And when we did the last tour, or it was that one, was the essence of, he only wanted to go to places and play where we hadn't been. Just to, so we did like Estonia and Latvia and Finland.
Because there was just this sort of like pent up demand because people really
and they never dreamed he'd even show up. I mean, we would land like in Turkey and stuff, and they go, he'd go, I bet you didn't think we were going to come, did you? But it was great. He had his energy and his vitality. But one of the things I loved about Phil so much was when we would rehearse for the tour, we'd rehearse for a month for it. We'd go into full production almost immediately, so that it was a fine, well-oiled machine. Everything, sound, lights, stages which had hydraulics and all this shit going on in them. And his attitude was so great. He said, "Look, that first audience deserves as good a show as the last audience." because so many acts go out and they'll spend the first couple of weeks of the tour dialing their show. And so by the time the later audience is seeing it, it's a different show. It's like totally like, So, I mean, when we rehearsed like out at the film studios, like at Shepperton or Bray, we would invite people to come to the rehearsals towards the end and sit and take critiques. Talk to him. I think Barry Manilow and his band came out one day. And
So when you were doing the rehearsals, they'd come and actually
they'd come and watch it because and we would record every rehearsal so that we could then all go sit and listen to the show and see what it's sounding. I mean, it was like so professional the way he approached it, and he was like to a fault almost engaged in every aspect of the show: lights, sound, pacing, you know, the staging and everything. He was like
one of those outsourcing any.
Not a guy who just showed up. So I love Phil dearly for that.
Was that his superpower?
Well, his superpower was that he was Phil Collins. Because he was everything. He was like the guy who was just everything involved in it. I mean, he had it, you know, and he knew how to work with the He was so self-deprecating. He would just like goof around on stage with it. And if you want to watch something completely ridiculous at some point, that tour, the 1985 tour, look up on YouTube Phil's band introductions. It's the most unbelievable thing you've ever seen. It went on forever, and it was like a Vegas lounge act. It was.
I think I've seen this.
Oh, it's so nuts. But he was that kind of a guy, you know. He was like every guy, you know. When he lived in Guildford, he was just like he's at the local pub, you know. It didn't matter that he was this world artist. He was like the guy. He was Phil from down the street. And, I love Phil for that.
The drummer that lives down the street.
Exactly. I mean, we would rehearse at one point. We rehearsed at the Chiddingfold Ex-Servicemen's Club, and all this stuff. It's just great. So I miss. I mean, actually Phil just wrote me the other day because of the fire situation here in LA, and he wrote to ask if everything was okay and everything because he's living in Switzerland, but he heard all about everything that's going on. So he's a great cat. It breaks my heart that at a point in his life, if we never played together again, okay, I can do it. I just want him to enjoy his later years. And he's just suffering with the amount of health issues he's had to deal with and stuff. It breaks my heart because he deserves so much better.
Absolutely. It's super sad, isn't it? We can't go on because I've teased at this like maybe 2 or 3 times.
I have to leave now. I'm done.
I cannot let you leave. You'll be walking out the door. I'm going to be hanging on to your ankle as you go out. Got to talk about Toto.
Oh, absolutely.
Because I've heard from, there's many tales going around. Oh, yeah. Have you heard about Lee Sklar when he had to dep the Toto gig? He had like a millisecond to prepare for it. So what's the actual story?
Well, first off, I'd known the guys.
And then we can show. We've got a video of you playing. Was that the second show you did?
Third show, I believe.
We've got a video
in
to
Paris.
show them. But what's the story?
I've known the guys from Toto since before they formed Toto. I mean, Jeff Porcaro and I had done lots and lots. Jeff was one of my favorite people in the world and one of the greatest drummers I ever worked with. And I knew the whole Porcaro family really well and loved all of them. So they were out there on the road, but as time went on, Mike Porcaro became ill. And they had no idea what was going on with him. They thought it was lupus, a whole bunch of different things. He was being tested, but it was really affecting his hands. And so ultimately it turned out that he had Lou Gehrig's disease, ALS. And so he contacted me and he said, look, can you take my place, to do this? In the hopes that he could come back. And so they didn't really know what was happening. And I've always said, the greatest phone call I could have ever gotten would have been Mike saying, get the fuck out of there, I'm coming back. Do you need a roadie? I would have done it. But I was in the studio working with Steve Lukather on his album. And he contacted, and he told me, he said, look, Mike's really ill now. We have a lot of tour left and he just can't do it. Is there any way you can do it? And I was getting ready to go in the studio with Reba McEntire and do another album with her. And so I called her up and I explained what was going on. She said, we're going to work forever. Just, go do it. It's not a big deal. And so what they did was they sent me a board tape of the show that they're doing. And so my process, because I had basically 5 days to learn the show. And then we were heading to Dubai to do the Dubai Jazz Festival. And so what I did was the very first day, I got the board mix and I listened to it and I wrote down the keys of each song because I'm kind of a shapeshifter. I don't really think about, chords and
You're using
all that.
more sort of like the geometry.
I just what I did was I drove around in my truck listening to the tape and I could visualize, since I knew what key it was in, kind of what was going on. The second day, I started to kind of work through the songs. I did that for 4 days. On the 5th day, we got together in Simon Phillips' studio and ran the show. And then that weekend, we left.
On the 5th day?
On the 5th day.
So essentially you got 4 days to learn
4 days to learn it, and the 5th day was a run through. And then we flew to Dubai, did the show there, did one other show, and then went to Paris, where they had already booked the film crew to do the Falling in Between concert, which they had assumed it was going to be Mike.
Which is the clip that we've
Which
got.
is what's on YouTube.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm amazed how good it was. How it all
Even
turned out.
you're amazed.
Oh, I'm
How did
amazed
I get through that?
Because I was, I wasn't stressing because I work best under pressure.
Yeah.
It's like there's so many times, like when I would work with Veronique Sanson, different artists like that, like we would be, backstage and the guys are all kind of hanging out and eating and stuff. And I'm got headphones on and I'm working on stuff. And they'd go, how come like you're always doing this? I said, there's only one guy on stage that needs to know the downbeat. And that's me.
Yeah.
I said, guitar keys, you guys can noodle around, volume pedal, wait till you hear it. Drummer, hit anything.
Yeah.
You're not tonally committed. It might be the right thing, but it's not wrong.
Yeah.
But I said, I need to know the material. So I live this shit. And also, like I said earlier, in the process of it, I'm also learning everybody else's parts. So like there's been, the funniest one of those was when I went to do Phil's tour in '85. I had never toured with him at that. I had done the album, but I really had never played the previous, music from like Face Value or any of that. Well, the week before going there, I was in Brazil doing the first Rock in Rio festival with James Taylor.
Oh, amazing.
So the whole time we're there, I'm in a room practicing, learning all these songs. I get to London and we're at Shepperton Film Studios. We start running this stuff. He can't remember half the stuff. None of the guys remember. And I'm going, well, here's how it goes. I'm like the new guy. And I'm like telling everybody how their parts are because they hadn't listened to any of it. We're going to be there like a month. It was just so funny. So like I'm really anal about preparation. I really don't like doing stuff. Like I said, as a jam. I mean, a little blues jam's fine. But, when people say,
want to know.
I really want to go out there and give it my best. And if I don't know what the fuck's going on, it's just going to be a mess.
Yeah.
And that's not the world I live in.
So with Toto, that first day, you're marking down the keys, you're driving in the truck, you listen to it.
Yeah.
On those 4 days, what do those 4 days actually look like?
Running the show.
Is it
over
running
and over?
Over and over again?
Yeah. First off,
And you first of all, I guess that you're working out the tunes.
well, I'm visualizing them because I'm also the kind of person that if I had charts, that's like heroin.
You're never going to get.
I'm never going to get off of them. So I really, when it comes to learning shows, I just play it over and over. I'm just like a rat running a maze at that point.
Yeah.
So, because people said, oh, well, you had charts. I love having charts, like when we do the Grammys and all that. I love having that book, and I'm just playing, like, cranking through it.
Yeah.
But like with stuff like Vero and Lyle and Toto and James Taylor, any of those things, and Phil, I just play it over and over and over.
And like with the guys at Toto, if you'd said to them, hey, yeah, I can do the gig, I'm going to have charts,
I would never say it.
would you just never say it?
I would never say it.
Because you know the expectation is no
Also,
charts.
if you walk on stage and there's a chart in front of you, you look like hired help.
Got it, yeah.
To me, I want to go out there and
So it's
look
like
like I'm in the
unwritten
band.
thing.
It's me.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not anything for anybody else. For me, I look at it as a challenge, like the gauntlet's been thrown down.
Yeah.
And the thing I did with Toto was I really tried to honor Mike. So like the initial shows like this, I was really dialed into what Mike had done. But as the tour went on, it morphed into like how I would have played him, even though Mike and I were very similar. I mean, it wouldn't have been it wasn't that different.
Yeah.
But it's like, like I said, like 2 months later into the tour when I was sitting with Simon one day and he just goes, God, I wish we were doing that show now. Because it had just
fully formed.
changed. Yeah, it really had fully formed at that point. But I'm really proud of what we did, and that lineup of Toto was still, to me, like one of the best lineups.
Sounds outrageous.
Yeah.
Put the clip on. It sounds outrageous.
This is, I believe, the opening of the show, which was great. They had a huge scrim in front of the stage, so when the thing started, the scrim dropped down, and there we were. Just a band and an old dude. And playing with Simon Phillips.
Oh, there, it's fallen down. Yeah. Third gig,
Yeah. Bobby Kimball. I've been working with Steve Lukather since he was 19 years old.
No way!
Yeah.
Incredible. He's doing all right for himself, isn't he?
A good kid. It's not like joining a blues band. I mean, these are defined songs.
What a voice as well. Remembering all of it. Yeah.
Wow. I was freaking.
Outrageous.
Yeah. And all of the clips from this show are amazing.
Did you know that they were doing that DVD? Was it like, oh, will you do the sub and you need to do the DVD as well?
Yeah, I had no idea.
You had no idea. Was that a good thing? Maybe.
Well, I mean, to me, it's just it's another challenge. I kind of look at all these things. To me, the only challenges that I don't feel comfortable about is if somebody calls me and they go, we want you to do like a Louis Johnson. Then I go, that's not a challenge to me. That's just, I know I'm suck.
It's just it's stylistically.
Yeah, stylistic.
Not
I'm
in
willing
your
to take
ballpark.
on anything,
Yeah,
though,
yeah.
you know, and it's always, to me, an adventure. Like when I would get called to do like the Latin Grammy Awards and stuff, and you're suddenly playing with all these artists and styles and stuff. I go, yeah. You know, I now look at it with enthusiasm, because I don't want to be complacent in what I do. I mean, I know I could probably spend the whole rest of my life just playing, you know, like ballads and things like that. But suddenly when you get this, and then the fun part is later on, like I still have people that come up to me and they go, man, Billy Cobham Spectrum. And I go, yeah, it was fun. You played on that? I have no idea. They haven't looked at credits. They have no idea, you know. And it's fun just to, you know, have all these different, you know, different things. You know, I spent years going to Nashville back and forth, working on country albums. And when I would go there, I had done, there's a producer named Jimmy Bowen. And Jimmy Bowen, I knew from Los Angeles. I did like Anthony Newley and all kinds of stuff with him in Los Angeles. And then he moved to Nashville and changed the country music scene. And he called and said, you want to come to Nashville and work? You know, I wouldn't want to live there, but I loved going back and forth. And ended up doing hundreds of country records. But then while I was there, then I suddenly met like the contemporary Christian guys. So they were calling me to come in and do all their records too. And, you know, each thing is a new adventure to me. I look at everything as just an opportunity to kind of just expand my horizons. And like I said, some stuff you feel like, man, I was made for this. And other stuff you go, I'm not the right guy.
And I guess it's about being open and honest in that situation.
Well, I mean, that was the beauty of like Jeff was like that. Like I did session with Jeff Porcaro, and Jeff would go, Jim Keltner's really the guy for this to the people.
Really? Yeah.
And Jim would come in and do it because they were best friends, and we all know who's got it. And there's just guys in town that I know. Like if somebody really wanted like a really lyrical, fretless thing like that, I go, you know, Pino's really good at that stuff. You know, when I listen to his stuff, I just go, this guy's just beautiful. I feel so bad for him. His mom just passed away. When I was in Wales, so in Cardiff with Judith Owen, we went to the family restaurant.
Oh, really?
With his sister, brother, and his mom, and I got them all behind the bar going, giving me the finger, and I sent it to Pino, and he freaked out. But, you know, it's just, you know, it's like when I listen to Money, 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 and to listen to what Anthony Jackson created, I'm just like fanboy, like I said, of all these players. They've all got their thing. Each guy's got his own little signature, and you just kind of go, man, what a cool community. When I watch your videos and you guys are sitting there playing and going over all these songs, and I just go, this is great. It
is great. It is great. Yeah. And talking about fanboys, I am a massive fanboy of you. Just so you know.
We'll have to go cuddle after this.
Yeah, we'll cuddle after this. But I cannot let you go without you telling everybody why your beard is the length it is, because there's an important story behind it.
Yeah, because if I'm wearing a strap and standing up, I cut it to where it won't go in the strings to mute. I kind of keep it there. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. There were times. So the worst is sometimes like when you'd be doing a quick change and you'd go to take it off and it would get caught like in the strap locks.
Well, be a disaster.
Yeah, no, it would be not a pretty picture at all. But it's been a remarkable journey, and I'm only grateful for the fact that, as of right now, there's no end in sight.
Yeah.
You know, that I'm still really, you know, active and busy.
And you play every day. I try to. We were talking about before, other than you've just been, you know, sorting the garden out and stuff like that. Yeah,
this week has been hard because I'm not sure when this will all air, but this is the week of the tragedy in Los Angeles of the fires. And I live in Pasadena, and that was one of the areas
hit. It was on your doorstep, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. I skirted it by about 4 miles. Up in Altadena's gone. I mean, most of that community is burned to the ground.
Crazy.
So we had almost 100-mile-an-hour winds going through where I live.
Yeah.
And so mountains of debris. So I have not played for a week, and just been out with a saw and cutting up, you know, wood and stuff, and raking and cleaning.
But usually you'd be playing.
Well, I try to get in and play a little bit. And one of the things I do, it's like I loved playing with Phil so much that I'll tend to run our last tour. And I know I'm not going to play Another Day in Paradise and Inside Out and those songs again with Phil, but I enjoy them so much that to me they're just a good keeping your chops up and where if he called me today and said, I feel good. We're going to hit the road today. I could probably nail about 90% of the show with a little bit of fine tuning.
It's so ingrained. It's ingrained into your DNA.
And it's so enjoyable.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that's the thing is those songs are just so good, and his show was so strong, and he was just such a remarkable guy to work with.
Yeah.
And his whole team, I mean, Tony Smith is one of the two best managers I've ever worked with, I think, are Tony Smith and Peter Asher.
Yeah.
You know, and so when you're involved in that kind of stuff where there's no bullshit anywhere, your focus is music. You're not having to sit there and question anything that's going on or anything. You're treated well. You don't have to. I don't have to be coddled, but at least treated decently out there. I mean, it's like, you know, when they talk about bands that have had these, you know, writers. You know, you go.
You mean you don't have like red M&Ms or something?
No. You know, I mean, it's the funniest. There's times where I sit and I watch like the awards shows, and I go, I have nothing to do with this business at all.
Yeah.
I go to work, and regardless if I might be on like 4 of the records that are up for things, and like this year there's a couple of them, I just go, I don't feel any affinity to this when I'm looking at that show.
Yeah.
But, you know, boy, when I get to walk in a recording studio where somebody sends me some files and I just get to sit there and think of a part and send it off, and they write back and they go, so good, thank you, man, I really appreciate it. Or like with Lyle now, going back to the UK with him, it's going to be really fun. So I'm forever grateful of the community that I live with.
Well, thanks so much for coming on, man. Like I see this as round 1, by the way.
Anytime, man. I would come back anytime.
Yeah, I'd love to have you on again. It's been incredible. Please, everybody in the comments, give Lee some love as well. And Lee Sklar, the working bass player. Awesome, man.
Thank you, man.